Welcome to Study Session 2, The Strengths of the Adult Education Practices in Traditional Society. Introduction. In this study session, we will justify the strengths of the adult education practices in indigenous society. We will proceed by outlining those major areas of strength of the indigenous arrangement, which sustained a vibrant society on the eve of the conquest of the continent by Europeans, and which have kept the continent moving till today. We will also describe adult education practical training and lifelong nature. Finally, we will examine the functional and moral aspects of traditional adult education practice. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to 1. Explain African traditional adult education and discuss the values and attitudes in the indigenous adult education practice which nourished the growth and development of the society. 2. Explain the lifelong nature of adult education and examine the functional and moral aspects of traditional adult education. Strength of adult education. Here, we will be asking ourselves questions like, was there really any strength in adult education? If yes, what are they? Our ability to accurately provide solutions to these questions will infer that we have been able to highlight the strengths of adult education. One deadly poison injected into the mind of Africans by European conquest and subsequent subjugation and colonialism was the loss of confidence. Africans were mesmerized by the efficacy of European arms and military superiority, which brought a vast continent to its feet over a short period of time. This loss of confidence has affected every facet of life. The truth of the matter is that the indigenous adult education system had enormous potentials. The fact that the continent fell to European rules should not be made to doubt the system's efficacy. Indeed, the current drive to revive the African personality may be seen as a reflection of the focused potentials of African traditional adult education system. Content of African traditional adult education. We have noted in the preceding study session that the content and scope of traditional adult education was very broad. We should add that, by its broad scope, traditional adult education was carefully designed to meet the needs of the communities it aimed to serve. This fact is illustrated by the system's responsiveness to the spiritual, medical, social, political, and economic demands and needs of the traditional society. Traditional education has been with the Africans since the inception of the black man, right from the Neolithic age. Every society, whether white or black, has its own system of training and ways of educating its citizens. Fafun 1994, Omolewa 2002, Oshokoya 2003 opined that every society, whether simple or complex, has its own system of training and educating its youth, and education for good life has been one of the most persistent concerns of men through history. Traditional adult education is a vocational education which serves as the economic base of both the individual and the society. Practical training. One very important strength of the indigenous adult education practice derived from its emphasis was on practical work. The introduction of Western education and its certification system to Africa has placed premium on the acquisition of theoretical knowledge. The result is that many graduates are ineffective on the job. For example, it is not unknown that a graduate of adult education cannot effectively handle an adult literacy class where the learners are about the age of his father and where they are asking whether they should first learn to read before they write or whether they should do both simultaneously. Farr has recorded that in Sierra Leone, the emphasis at the non-formal education work is on the acquisition of practical knowledge. There is normally no theoretical means of instruction. What is usually underestimated, however, is that in the course of the apprenticeship, the trainee learns not only to fabricate products, but also the process of selecting good scrap metal, the blacksmith raw materials. He learns customer relations, pricing policy, and what Oyeneye describes as the informal norms associated with one's vocation. Lifelong systems. It is also imperative that we analyze adult education from the perspective of its nature. By lifelong education, we mean to say that it is the education from the cradle to the grave. Some scholars, such as Omolewa 1991, believe that education still goes beyond the grave. The traditional adult education practice is continuing in the sense that if one is interested in becoming a hunter or herbalist, one would keep on learning those arts. Sarumi 2005 stated that for education to be effective, it has to relate to the past, present, and future of the society. It has to bear practical relevance to the socio-cultural background of the people. This has continuing values, as one will be able to sharpen a skill as well as innovate and develop the skills. This is so because the emphasis in traditional society was on the integration of all aspects of education, formal, non-formal, and informal. A young man introduced to an apprenticeship scheme is required to spend a predetermined number of years acquiring the necessary skills so that he will always think about the subject every time. At the same time, the young African was simultaneously put through vocational education, religious, cultural, and civic education. This submission then corroborates the view of Fajano on the aims of education in traditional society, when he said, discipline in all the faculties of life of the individual to bring out the human qualities in the child and to help the individual at different stages to become a useful member of the society. To fail to achieve these aims was to fail woefully in life. In essence, it is an education that started from childhood as the parents took the preparation of their children for future career very seriously. In the traditional society, Nigerian youth and adults continue to spend their life learning, be it from the rich submission of elders, that is, proverbs, incantations, songs, folk tales, lyrics, or festivals, a potent force which help in the area of community reawakening. The usual note of warning to the dead as regards imploring the deceased not to eat worms in heaven shows that education goes beyond the grave. Functional and moral in orientation. In this facet of this particular study session, we will be explaining the significance in functional and moral adult education. Functional and moral aspects of traditional adult education practice shall be examined. The traditional adult education was practical oriented, as one just has to demonstrate the skill acquired. At the same time, it promotes morals, which in turn promotes peace in the traditional society. In the area of functional education, traditional society also provided for training in all available occupations, notably hunting, farming, weaving, and building traditional medicine, and professional warfare in pre-literate Africa. One just has to demonstrate the skills acquired in the above mentioned before he can be allowed to practice in the traditional society. Hence, some homes specialized in one combination of these occupations. Among the Yorubas, for example, a man known as Anyoyemi would immediately be recognized as belonging to the family of drummers, and Awoyemi would similarly be known to trail from the herbalist profession. Furthermore, a considerable attention was paid to the teaching of children and youth methods of production of good crops. They were expected to demonstrate skills as yams were distributed on the ground prepared, and the boys buried them, while a child is advised not to turn the buds downwards while planting, for to do so would mean the death of that plant. These were promoted through the promulgation of different taboos to safeguard the peace of the society. For example, the Egungun among the Yorubas believed to be a reincarnated ancestor, once with a mission of peace and goodwill to his children still on earth. He enjoins all to be well behaved, orderly, honest, and hardworking. Moreover, the respect for elders was a common practice in the traditional society, as the young adults dare not look straight into the eyes of the elders. Fadikwe 1970 informed us that no child was allowed to be rude to the elders. If he does, he would be rebuked. Some taboos were promulgated in the traditional society as regards the promotion of peace, which can be got through acceptable behaviors. Such taboos include a wife who was caught committing adultery would have to appease the gods of her husband. In Yoruba land, such a woman would appease the ancestors of her husband, while in Igbo land, she would offer sacrifice to Chukwu. Two wives caught involving in an unhealthy rivalry in Yoruba land would also have to be beaten publicly by masquerades. All these techniques, among many others, are to promote peace in the traditional societies of pre-literate Africa. Study session summary. In this study session, we justify the strength of the adult education practices in indigenous society. We proceeded by outlining those major areas of strength and the indigenous arrangements which sustained a vibrant society on the eve of the conquest of the continent by Europeans, and which have kept the continent moving till today. We also described adult education's practical training and lifelong nature. Finally, we examined the functional and moral aspects of traditional adult education practice. End of study session 2. Thanks for listening.